Ford's much improved third generation Focus ST is now smarter, classier and more dynamically adept. In hatch or estate guise with petrol or diesel power, it's a car that's now easier to get the most from, and a machine you can enjoy to the full on your favourite road without afterwards having to pay for it with the kind of over-firm ride you simply don't want in everyday traffic. Ultimately, so many quick cars can feel, well, rather irrelevant. Here's one that's anything but.
ST is a badge that, when it comes to Ford, stands for quick but not concussive, a performance level that sits just above the company's fast but family-friendly Z-Tech S models, but just below the track-spec RS derivatives. A badge applied to the kind of car that a red-blooded racer could afford, enjoy and use every day. A car like this, the much-improved third-generation Focus ST. It's the kind of car that's always democratised performance, giving you the speed of a supercar within the body and the budget of something much more ordinary. Other brands promise this kind of thing, but in reality, they often do little more than bolt a set of spoilers and a turbo onto something more conventional. Ford, though, has a different approach. The Blue Oval brand boasting a long history of developing proper performance versions of its mainstream models, designed by enthusiasts to be driven by enthusiasts. That was a perfect definition for the very first properly quick ST Focus, the Mark II model of 2005. That car was rapid, both in speed and in the way that its 225 PS 2.5-litre turbo engine drained its fuel tank in next to no time. Hence the need for this third-generation version. A design first launched in 2012 on a model in which Blue Oval Motorsport DNA had to be matched with manageable running costs. Ultimately, it was a car that had to be as adept at cruising to Silverstone as it would be when lapping it. In principle, this sounded suspiciously like a recipe for compromise. The kind of thing, indeed, you might expect might have been necessary from what was the company's very first global performance model, a car developed in one spec for over 40 worldwide markets. In fact, though, the original version of the ST turned out to be a very likeable family hot hatch indeed. Its EcoBoost turbo petrol power plant was efficient, pricing was very affordable, and the car was blessed with a class-leading ride and handling combination. It wasn't perfect, mind you. There were prettier contenders to be found in the Focus-sized shopping rocket segment, and certainly plenty with much higher quality interiors. Plus, drivers wanting to use this Focus's full 250 PS in anything but a straight line often had to cope with a bit of torque steer and general waywardness. Fortunately, Ford had a package of improvements in mind and has delivered them with the improved facelifted Mark III model that we're going to look at here. A car first brought to market early in 2015. It's certainly much smarter, and with this version, ST buyers get the option of diesel power for the first time, available alongside a more sonorous and slightly more efficient version of the same EcoBoost petrol unit the car had before. Either way, the engineers reckon that handling modifications will enable owners to transmit torque to tarmac a little more easily than was possible before. While inside, the company claims to have provided a much nicer cabin that'll narrow the quality gap to this car's much pricier Golf GTI arch rival. It all sounds quite promising, doesn't it? Time to put this Focus to the test. If you're familiar with fast Fords, then you might be forgiven for approaching this one with a few questions in your mind. Let's start first with the issue most directly on hand here, since we've got an EcoBoost petrol model to test. Can this improved Focus ST get its 250 PS to the tarmac with a little more decorum this time around? The Blue Oval brand engineers had a good stab at managing that previously, but with the original version of this car, it was still all too easy to get greedy with the throttle and find yourself wheel spinning and torque steering just when you needed traction and stability. Ford needed to sort this, not only to get the petrol version right, but also to clear the way for something that you might not have ever expected to see in one of its ST badged models, a diesel engine. The 2-litre TDCI unit in question seems at first glance to be a poor relation to its petrol stablemate, offering only 185 PS. A closer inspection of the stats, though, reveals that in that more important arbiter of performance, torque, the diesel version of this hot Focus actually has the edge over the petrol derivative, pulling power through the gears, rising from 360 to 400 newton meters. In other words, if this Ford is still going to feel a little wayward the first time you encounter a damp surface or hurl yourself into a bumpy bend with any real vigour, you're going to be even more aware of the fact in the diesel version.
Ford could have added four-wheel drive and a limited slip differential to cure this tendency, but the brand wanted to reserve both of those things for its hottest Focus, the 350 PS RS model.
In any case, quick-fix features like these would have made the ST costlier and heavier, so less efficient, diluting its value proposition. Hence the more measured approach taken with the package of dynamic changes introduced with this revised model. The front-end body structure is stiffer, new front springs has been fitted, and there's sportier tuning for the shock absorbers, both front and rear, along with stiffer suspension bushes. Plus, there are model-specific anti-roll bar settings carried over from before. As a result of all this, turn-in is sharper, helped as before by an even more effective version of the electronic torque vectoring control system that shunts power to the wheel that can best use it through tighter bends. The car certainly feels more agile than before, with response further aided by improvements to an electrically assisted steering system, which provides even more feelsome feedback and has now been empowered to make better use of its clever TSC torque steer compensation setup. We thought before that TSC was a neat idea, and we still do. When torque steer threatens, that feeling of the wheel writhing in your hands under heavy acceleration, a little motor in the steering feeds in an opposite force to counter it, while leaving just enough wheel movement to remind you that you are, after all, at the wheel of a 154 miles per hour hot hatch. So yes, we're talking of a significant dynamic improvement here, and importantly, one that Ford has managed to deliver without affecting what for us was the most impressive thing about the original version of this car, its ride and handling balance. This is where so many hot hatches come unstuck, the firm suspension needed for terrific tarmac handling, inflicting upon you the need for an uncomfortable, jiggly ride. Is this Focus ST better? Well, put it this way, if we were heading up one of Ford's rival brands, we would be buying our engineers this car and suggesting that they use it as a dynamic benchmark. I mean, whether the lap you're completing is of Silverstone or your local one-way system, this Ford will be fine with it. Not that this is intended as a track day tearaway. If that's what you want, then a harder-edged hot hatch like a Megane Renault Sport will suit you better. This Focus ST isn't really that sort of car. Think of it as more like a Golf GTI with a bit of extra added bite. You'll be closer to the mark. Ford sees the Golf as this car's closest rival, and so felt it had to follow Volkswagen's lead in offering that diesel alternative I mentioned earlier to hot hatch buyers in this segment. There are differences in approach though. A Golf GTD is a slightly softer, more cruisy thing than its GTI stablemate, so much so that you might even begin to question the ultimate credibility of its hot hatch status. There's none of that with an Focus ST diesel. No, it won't munch the motorway miles with the calm fluidity of a Golf, but when it comes to the twisty stuff, it'll feel a league removed from the GTD. As with the choice between petrol and diesel in this Ford, it really comes down to what you want. If my tax status and need for lower running costs dictated the need for this Focus ST in TDCI form, I'd be consoling myself with that 11% higher torque figure and the way that the performance is so much more accessible in the diesel. You've access to everything it has to offer from as little as 3,500 RPM. To be specific, rest to 62 miles an hour can take as little as 8.1 seconds en route to 135 miles per hour. In this petrol model, you have to rev the thing right up to 5,500 RPM to achieve peak power, although you'll access this a little more readily if you opt for the Ford-approved Mount Tune engine upgrade that boosts output from the petrol power plant to 275 PS. That won't change the 0 to 62 miles per hour sprint time much, which takes around 6.5 seconds, but torque improves to 400 Newton meters. If we had to choose, we'd still prefer to get our Focus ST powered by this one's petrol power plant. Revving it isn't a chore, but part of an involving experience aided by two things. First, the sweet shifting short-throw 6-speed manual gearbox. Unlike Volkswagen Group rivals, Ford declines to offer an auto option. And second, a brilliant set of aural fireworks that the engineers have finally perfected. The original version of this car rather failed in that regard, using a sound chamber that tried to amplify the exhaust induction noise, but succeeded only in providing a resonance under acceleration that one writer described as sounding like a phlegmy Rottweiler hiding inside the dashboard. This time round, the engine note gets enhanced via the cabin speakers based on inputs from engine and cabin noise, rather than some synthesized sound file. The result is surprisingly authentic. Ford has learnt sporting subtlety in recent years, to the point where you might even find this Focus ST's aesthetics a little on the modest side, especially if you opt for the practical estate body style that's offered as an alternative to the 5-door hatch. There's no rakish 3-door option, but the stylists have done their best to spice up the two more practical body shapes that are on offer, with careful detailing that offers a more muscular take on the kinetic design of the standard model. Or at least it does with this revised version, which gets a more dynamically sculpted bonnet, slimmer headlamps and rectangular front fog lamps as part of a mid-term package of updates. Like all revised third-generation Focus models, this one gets an Aston Martin-style trapezoidal front grille, here honeycomb trimmed and positioned above a lower spoiler with sharper, more distinct sculpting. Moving around to the sides, owners of the original version of this model will also take in the sleeker flanks and redesigned 18-inch alloy wheels that can now be optionally specified up to 19 inches in size, feature evocative red brake calipers and be clad with bespoke Michelin performance rubber. It's in profile that you better appreciate this improved model's lower, wider stance, something embellished by bulging side skirts that, as before, emphasise the 10mm lowered chassis height. At the back there are improvements too, with minor changes to the high-mounted roof spoiler and smeared back rear lamp clusters, and major ones to the menacing-looking lower apron, which features a smarter full-width graphic and diffuser elements, flanking a sexy pair of mid-mounted Lamborghini Aventador-style double hexagon twin exhausts. The overall effect remains somewhat colour-sensitive, a visual combination that has more impact with brighter colours, like the ST-specific orange that Ford calls Tangerine Scream. And inside? Well, take a seat and at first glance things are much as before. The cockpit marked out from that of humbler Focus models primarily by two ST model hallmarks. First up, most will love these grippy Recaro sports seats, chairs that can be rather gaudily colour coordinated and, as before, might be a little over tight for those over familiar with the offerings of Colonel Sanders. The other key ST distinguishing feature can be found on top of the dash, with a bank of 3 extra gauges that deal with turbo boost pressure, oil temperature and oil pressure, and are there to serve as a nice visual throwback to legendary fast Fords of the past, like the Escort Mexico. As before, the sports pedals and satin chrome-topped gear knob are bespoke fit items, as is the steering wheel, a nicer, flat-bottomed multifunction item with soft feel leather trim. Take a more detailed glance around, though, and you may begin to note that changes have been made. For those familiar with the pre-facelifted version of this model, the main improvement will be the cleaner, classier look of the dash. Soft touch plastics, black satin trim, chrome detailing and higher quality climate control switches do wonders for the cabin ambience. The redesigned centre console offers more space as well as a sliding integrated armrest. Plus there are deep door bins, a large glove box and a drink holding area that can take a 1 litre bottle and a 0.4 litre cup simultaneously. A more significant change, though, with this updated model lies in Ford's efforts to combat the dreaded scourge of button clutter. In the original Mark III version of this car, you could have steering wheel controls dealing with no fewer than 23 functions, enough to give even the most determined technophobe handbook fatigue. This time around, though there are still quite a few switches spread around the dash, they're larger, classier and easier to get to grips with. Go for a version of this car with Ford's latest generation Sync 2 infotainment system, and many of the functions that would previously have been dealt with by fascia controls are now accessible via menus in the 8-inch colour touchscreen. Through Sync 2 you can control audio, navigation, climate control and phone functions via voice or touchscreen buttons. I would master the voice functionality if I were you, as the buttons can be rather fiddly to use. Once you're au fait with this, you can issue simple one-shot voice commands like play song to play a track from a CD, or even I'm hungry to bring up a list of local restaurants on the split-screen satellite navigation system. Sync 2 is optional on lower trim levels and is well worth specifying, as without it you're provided only with a much smaller 4.2-inch display, operable only with more conventional button-orientated functionality. Time to move rearwards, where the passenger space is accessed via these wide opening doors, but can be fitted with neat edge protectors that pop out to prevent car park dings. Inside, fears that curved rear roofline will severely compromise headroom turn out to be groundless, although the wedgy side profile does hem you in with a slightly higher window line. You sit highly positioned for a good view of the road ahead, and both head and legroom are adequate, even for a couple of 6-footers. As usual with cars in this class, 3 adults would be rather squashed here, but a trio of kids should find the space provided quite sufficient. And out back, well, when evaluating boot space, you have to take into account that this Focus uses the kind of sophisticated multi-link rear suspension setup that many rivals make you do without. Now, this is bulkier than a cruder setup, which is why when you lift the rear hatch, you'll find slightly less cargo room than rival models will offer. In this estate version, for example, there's 476 litres on offer, and you only get that if, rather unwisely, you choose to do without the optional space-saver spare wheel. Now, in comparison, a Seat Leon ST Cupra estate would give you 587 litres, while a Volkswagen Golf GTD estate would give you 605 litres. Most Focus ST buyers will be opting for the hatch model, which offers 316 litres if you opt to do without any kind of spare wheel. Again, some way behind the class norm. Will that be an issue for potential Focus ST customers? Well, it didn't seem to be with the original version of this car. Plus, of course, you can push the 60/40 split folding rear bench forward. Although you do have to flip the seat bases up first, which is a bit fiddly. Still, once that process is completed, you get a completely flat load area, and as much as 1,502 litres can be freed up in this estate model, or 1,101 litres in the hatch. Does a high-performance hot hatch really need to cost well over £25,000? Well, Ford reckons not, and proved its point at the original launch of this revised model with a starting figure for Focus ST ownership that was well under £23,000, nearly £5,000 less than a comparable 5-door Golf GTI, a car 30 PS less powerful. That affordable starting figure remains here, a price that of course applies to the entry-level variant in the Focus ST range. Go for a better specified version like the one I have here, and that price differential to that Volkswagen will be trimmed pretty quickly. The big change with this improved Focus ST comes with the news that buyers are no longer restricted solely to Ford's 250 PS 2-litre EcoBoost petrol unit, but can now, for exactly the same asking price, also choose a diesel version. The 2-litre TDCi variant in question offers 184 PS, so can't match its petrol stablemate for outright power, but counters with more torque. The 400 Nm reading, a 40 Nm improvement. As before, most will want this car in 5-door hatchback guise. There's no 3-door option, but there is the alternative of the estate body style that we're trying here at a £1,100 premium for those who need extra versatility. What you can't have on this car is the auto gearbox option that some rivals offer. We don't think that that'll be a deal breaker for many hot hatch buyers, though. Time for a bit more detail on that value proposition. It's, after all, one of the car's strongest selling points in the family hot hatch segment. As I've said, this revised ST model was launched costing around £22,500 in hatch form in base ST1 trim. From there, buyers have the option of finding around £1,500 more for mid-range ST2 spec or around £3,700 more for top ST3 trim. For fair comparisons with the kind of spec you get on direct family hot hatch rivals, we'll use this Focus ST2 variant as a benchmark. So, a £24,000 car in ordinary hatch guise. I'll use that as a benchmark figure of the comparisons I'm about to make, and we'll start by considering the value merits of the petrol model. They're considerable. A Focus ST2 matches a rival Skoda Octavia VRS 2-litre TSI on price and substantially undercuts everything else in the family hatchback hot hatch segment. A Peugeot 308 GTI 250 brake horsepower model will cost you around £27,000, while you need to budget around £28,000 for either the Seat Leon Cupra 285-door or that Volkswagen Golf GTI I mentioned. Once, this list of rivals would have included the Renault Sport Megane, but now that's been turned into a less usable track-style car. And anyway, it only comes with 3 doors and it costs around £29,000. More realistic alternatives to this Ford can be found in less overtly sporting but comparably performing premium branded compact hatch models. I'm thinking of BMW's 125i M Sport and Mercedes' A250 AMG, both of which can be had for around £27,000. Other potential options include an Alfa Romeo Giulietta Quadrifoglio Verde for around £28,500 and a Volvo V40 T5 for around £30,000. But those two cars come only with automatic transmission. Now, let's turn our attention to the diesel-engined Focus ST model's value proposition. Again, Volkswagen Group brands provide the most obvious alternatives and offer the same 5-door hatch and estate body style choices. The same sort of money as Ford asks here would buy you 2-litre TDI 184 PS diesel versions of either the Skoda Octavia VRS or the Seat Leon FR. This same engine is also used by the Volkswagen Golf GTD, but that car costs nearly £28,000. Again, there are some comparably performing premium branded compact hatch models that you might want to look at. A Volvo V40 in D4R design form is the closest match, priced at around £26,000. Otherwise, you could conceivably look at, say, a Mercedes A220D AMG Sport for around £28,000 or a BMW 125D M Sport for around £30,000. But both of those cars only come with an automatic gearbox. If, having considered all of this, you conclude that it is a Focus ST that you really want, then you're going to need to know just how generous Ford has been when it comes to standard equipment. Well, let's see. Even entry-level ST1 variants come complete with the body kit, the sports suspension and the 18-inch alloy wheels that you would probably expect. The exterior detailing, including a unique rear spoiler, a menacing rear diffuser and a central twin-exhaust tailpipe. Inside, there are lovely Recaro front sport seats and bespoke leather trimming for the steering wheel and for the gear knob. You also get air conditioning, push-button starting, powered heated mirrors, a Thatcham Category 1 alarm, a DAB audio system and Ford's clever Sync 1 connectivity setup with Bluetooth and voice control, plus USB and aux IN ports. Oh, and the useful Ford My Key system, which will recognise your favourite driving settings from an individually programmed ignition key. Upgrade yourself to this ST2 spec, and the Blue Oval brand will also add colour-coded partial leather panels onto the Recaro seats, along with dual-zone climate control, a quick clear heated windscreen, auto headlamps and wipers, an auto-dimming rear-view mirror, carpet mats, LED rear lamps and LED daytime running lights. Finally, there's top ST3 spec, which adds the full house Ford Sync 2 8-inch touchscreen infotainment and navigation system to this car, along with power adjustable leather sports seats and cruise control with a speed limiter. At this level, there's also keyless entry, rear parking sensors, illuminated front door scuff plates and power folding mirrors. While outside, this top ST derivative is recognisable by adaptive bi-xenon headlamps and smarter Y-spoke alloy wheels with red brake calipers. Options include most of the items that you can get on any ordinary Focus, including neat pop-out door protectors that guard the door edges from car park dings. We'd also want to look at things like a rear-view camera, a heated steering wheel, a spare wheel, and on lesser variants, this top version's Sync 2 navigation and infotainment system with its 8-inch colour touchscreen. Your choice of exterior colour will be important, particularly if you go for the ST2 model, seeing as on that variant, you may well have to put up with whatever shade you choose on the seat facings in the cabin. Across the Focus ST range, there's a unique palette of paint options, ranging from dark grey, stealth, through frozen white, moon dust silver, panther black, and the bright orange tangerine scream. Beyond that, we'd particularly want to look at the ST Style Pack, which gives you bigger 19-inch wheels and grippier Michelin tyres, plus rear privacy glass, illuminated scuff plates, and red brake calipers. And on the subject of brakes, if you get the larger 19-inch wheel option, then you'll also be able to specify bigger 335mm diameter front brake discs that'll give improved stopping power and greater resistance to fade during hard track driving. Finally, if you're going to go to all this trouble to maximise performance and you're looking at the petrol model, then you'll probably also want to spend an extra £1,200 on the performance upgrade that's provided by Ford's officially endorsed tuner, Mount Tune. This pushes power up to 275 PS and torque up to 400 Newton meters without invalidating your warranty. On to safety and justification of this car's 5-star Euro NCAP test showing. One of the key changes made to this revised model lies in the introduction of what Ford calls ETS, the letter standing for Enhanced Transitional Stability, the setup functioning as part of the car's ESC stability control system. ETS certainly sounds very clever, able to sense vehicle stability and driver inputs and predict when a skid or a loss of control might occur. It's then able to intervene to correct things, using individual wheel braking to maintain control during rapid changes of direction at speed, say when changing lanes, for example. I mentioned ESC stability control. I know you get it on every new car these days, but this 3-stage system is a bit more sophisticated than the norm. Track warriors will be glad to know that the off mode really does turn everything off. And there's also an interim sports mode setting that dampens down the electronic intervention, but will still cut in to help you should torque get the better of your talent. If that's still not enough to keep you out of the hedge, then you'll be glad of the 7 airbags that come as part of this Focus's usual 5-star Euro NCAP safety showing. Should you wish to go further, then providing you avoid entry-level trim, you can pay extra for various additional safety features. You might be familiar with blind spot information system technology that stops you from dangerously pulling out to overtake when there's a car in your blind spot. or the cross-traffic alert feature that functions when you're reversing out of a parking space and warns you if other vehicles are about to cross your path. We'd particularly want to look at the driver assistance pack, which uses a camera system to provide 6 key features. First up is an active city stop setup, which now works at up to 31 miles an hour, and it can warn you of impending low-speed collisions and, if necessary, brake the car to help you avoid them. Secondly, there's an auto high beam system that automatically dips your lights for you at night. Thirdly, you get a traffic sign recognition feature that pictures road signs as you pass them and displays them onto the dash. Fourthly, there's a driver alert system that monitors your reactions as you drive and will prompt you if it thinks you're getting drowsy. And finally, there are 2 systems for highway use. A lane departure warning setup that alerts you if you're drifting out of your lane, and a lane keeping aid feature that can apply steering torque to guide the car back into that lane once you've drifted out of it. Given that the previous generation pre-2012 5-cylinder Focus ST model was particularly known for its prodigiously thirsty running costs, Ford has done well to turn things around with this 4-cylinder version. With that old car, it only took a spirited drive to seriously drop your economy right into the teens. Add to that a CO2 figure of 224 grams per kilometre that played havoc with your tax return, and you had a model very much out of step with these recessional times. When the original version of this 4-cylinder model was launched, buyers found that the Blue Oval brand's engineers had taken considerable steps to improve things. True, it didn't sound quite as good, but it went over 20% further on every gallon, which was more than ample compensation for most. With this revised Euro 6 compatible ST, Ford's engineers have massaged the showing of their 2-litre EcoBoost petrol engine even further, tweaking the twin independent variable cam timing technology and the high-pressure direct injection, and adding an auto start-stop function that cuts the engine when you don't need it, either stuck in traffic or waiting at the lights. None of this is quite enough to get running costs down to Golf GTI levels, but as a result of all this, fuel economy has been enhanced by 6%. The combined cycle figure improved from 39.2 miles per gallon to 41.5 miles per gallon. We reckon you'd easily get well over 30 miles per gallon on the motorway. The CO2 return, meanwhile, has improved from 169 grams per kilometre to 159 grams per kilometre. If that's not good enough, then there's always the 2-litre TDCi diesel version, a model Ford describes as the cleanest and most fuel-efficient performance car it's ever built. A lot of trouble has been gone to in pursuit of that, with the installation into this engine of a special thermal management system, a variable oil pump, a low-friction diamond-like coating on selected bearing surfaces, and Ford's lean NOx trap exhaust after-treatment system. As a result of all this, the TDCi variant can match its Golf counterpart, with a set of numbers that seem to be more in keeping with a Super Mini than a family hot hatch. 67.3 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and 110 grams per kilometre of CO2. That is pretty much identical to what you get in a rival Golf GTD. The numbers stay the same, incidentally, regardless of whether you choose the hatch or the estate. And these numbers should have a positive effect on residual values. Not enough to approach the kind of low depreciation that you'd say get on a Volkswagen Golf GTI, but then you're paying a lot less up front. Expect the petrol version of this Focus to be worth around 40% of what you originally paid for it after the usual 3-year, 60,000 mile operating period. Like us, you might, though, be surprised to hear that independent experts CAP reckon that the diesel ST will hold on to its value better than a rival Golf GTD. What else? Well, there's no prepaid servicing pack option, and on the subject of maintenance, front tyre wear might well be pretty dramatic if you habitually drive this car hard, so allow for that. Finally, as with any hot hatch, insurance will need budgeting for. This car grouped between 34 and 36E, depending on the variant you choose. Let's be clear. The original version of this Mark III model Focus ST was a very good car indeed. but it wasn't as involving and rewarding as its little Fiesta ST stablemate. It wasn't the car it could have been. Now it is. There's a difference between a mere hot hatch and a properly developed performance car. And if you want to know exactly what that is, well, we'd recommend that you try this Focus and then go and drive one of its rivals. Yes, some might be faster, others may feel more upmarket, but none are so enjoyable to drive quickly. This car now feels far more comfortable transmitting its torque to the tarmac, and almost as importantly, Ford has made the whole process sound more exciting too. Put everything together and the result for us is the only everyday usable contender in this class that we'd also want to take on track. On top of that, the smarter looks are an improvement and the classier cabin a big step forward, if still not quite a match for the best that rivals can offer. This apart though, there's little else to criticise here. This Focus ST is, after all, now the very definition of what a car of this kind should be. A guilt-free fast hatch with near supercar performance and technology that's relatively affordable and perfectly practical. You get a class-leading ride and handling balance, estate versatility if you want it, and the option of low diesel running costs if that's needed. All without compromise, in a car that deserves to be remembered fondly, in a fine tradition of fast Fords.